The snow never stopped falling that day. Jon stood at the broken steps of the Red Keep, his black cloak torn at the edges, wet from blood and ash. The throne room behind him still reeked of fire and death. Daenerys was gone. He had killed her with shaking hands and a shattered heart. Not for power, he told himself that again, but for the realm, for peace. But peace never came. The people of King's Landing had no more strength to cheer or mourn. Their city was dust. Mothers still dug through ruins for their children. Soldiers buried their own in silence. Drogon had flown east, vanishing into the sky with Daenerys' lifeless body in his claws. No one knew if he would return. Jon didn't care. He just stood there as the snow turned red around his boots. They came for him 2 days later. Tyrion, silent and exhausted, accompanied by Ser Davos and a group of battered Unsullied. Grey Worm didn't speak. His eyes were colder than death. But even he seemed unsure what justice looked like now. Jon didn't resist. He offered no excuses. When Tyrion asked him why, Jon just said, "She would have burned them all." There was no trial, no ceremony. The great houses were gone. House Lannister was ash. Baratheon had no voice. Tyrell, Martell, even Arryn, all broken or leaderless. Sansa, the only one left who still wore her name like armor, declared the North's independence and rode back to Winterfell. Bran vanished into his new visions. Arya sailed west. And Jon, they made him king. Not because he wanted it, but because there was no one else. The throne was melted. Drogon had turned it to slag in his rage, but the symbol still stood. They reforged it, mockingly perhaps, from swords pulled from the dead in the streets, bent, bloody, rusted blades, twisted together. In the image of old glory, Jon called it the throne of ash and blood. He sat on it once and never stood the same again. He ruled in silence. His council was made of ghosts, men and women who had lost everything. No laughter echoed in the halls, no feasts, no songs. The court of King Jon Snow was a tomb with breathing corpses. Whispers spread quickly, the king who killed the dragon. Queen, the bastard of Winterfell who now ruled from her grave. Some called him the Mourning Wolf, others the Cold King. But few dared speak to him. He rarely left the Red Keep. The gardens were burned, the crypts full, and in every dream, Jon saw her eyes staring at him, betrayed, beautiful and burning. Some nights he walked alone to the room where he had stabbed her. The floor was still blackened. He sat there often until morning, whispering her name. Ghost, ever loyal, never left his side, but even the direwolf had grown thin, restless, as if the spirit of the North was dying too. 3 months passed. Then came the first rebellion. A knight from the Stormlands declared Jon a kinslayer and a usurper. He rallied men who had once sworn fealty to Daenerys. Their banners were scorched, but their will was iron. They marched on King's Landing with only 300 men, hoping the people would rise with them. Jon met them at the gates. He didn't speak, didn't offer parley. He raised long claw, and what followed wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. His own men watched in quiet horror as the king they followed cut down rebels like a man possessed. He didn't fight with fury. He fought like he had nothing left to lose. When it was over, Jon stood amidst the bodies, soaked in blood that wasn't his. He looked at the sky and whispered one word. Why? But no gods answered, and the people began to fear him. Weeks turned into months, and King Jon Snow's name became more legend than man. The city healed slowly, but not in spirit. Rubble was cleared, but fear remained. The markets reopened, but people spoke in whispers. No bard sang in his praise, no banners were raised in joy. The Iron Throne might have been reforged, but the kingdom itself was still broken. The council Jon had kept, if it could even be called that, met once a week, usually in silence. Tyrion tried to offer advice, but Jon rarely listened. Sir Davos did what he could, managing ports and trade to keep the capital breathing. Gendry Baratheon, legitimized but lost, tried to restore order in the Stormlands, but failed to gather enough support. There were no more Targaryens, and only one Stark remained in the south. The rebellion Jon crushed wasn't the last. It was only the beginning. Word spread across Westeros that the bastard king ruled by blade, not right. Daenerys' loyalists called him the Snow Butcher. They whispered that he had poisoned her, not stabbed her, that he had tricked her with love to steal her crown. The stories twisted and spread like wildfire. Jon ignored them. He refused to send ravens of warning. He did not visit the lords. He held no feasts, no alliances. His crown lay dusty in a dark chamber, untouched since the coronation. He wore no sigil. Only the black of the Night's Watch still clung to his shoulders, a silent mockery of who he once was. But inside something was changing. He had killed for peace. But the war within him was only beginning. At night he heard her voice, soft, furious, begging. Daenerys' face haunted him, not with rage, but sorrow. In dreams, she stood in the ruined throne room, her hand reaching toward him, her mouth moving but no sound coming out. And always behind her, the throne burned again. One night he awoke in a cold sweat, blood on his hands. Real blood. He had walked, still asleep, to the Tower of the Hand. A servant lay slumped on the stairs, his throat slit by Longclaw, which rested in Jon's trembling grip. He stared at the body, heart pounding, and whispered, "What have I become?" Tyrion was the first to find him. "You need rest, Jon," he said gently. "You need to let go." Jon didn't respond. "You don't have to be her ghost. You're still alive." "Am I?" Jon whispered. "Or just the shadow that killed the sun?" Tyrion looked at him, pity and fear warring in his eyes. "If you keep bleeding like this, there won't be anything left of you." But Jon wasn't listening. His gaze drifted to the sky. A storm was coming. He could feel it in his bones. Not snow this time, but something darker. And then it arrived. Not on ships, not through ravens, but on dragon wings, a black shadow blotted. The sun one morning as Drogon returned, screeching with fury over the Red Keep. His wings scorched the clouds, his eyes glowing with grief. The people screamed, running for shelter. Archers scrambled, bells rang, but Jon walked alone into the courtyard. Drogon landed like thunder. Jon stared into the beast's eyes. No command, no fear, just silence between a man and the last living. A dragon, he dropped Longclaw. "If you've come to kill me," he said, "I won't stop you." Drogon growled, deep and ancient. He stepped closer, nostrils flaring as he sniffed the man who had taken his mother's life. But instead of fire, he let out a long, low cry, a sound so heavy with pain it silenced the whole city. Then he turned and flew, not away, but to the ruins of Dragonstone. And the message was clear. The true war wasn't over. Dragonstone had long stood as a symbol of Targaryen rule. Carved by ancient Valyrian hands, it now looked like a wound in the sea, scarred by fire and time. Drogon returned to it like a grieving beast returning to his den, circling the skies as if waiting for a queen who would never come. Jon followed. Days later, not as a conqueror, not even as a king, but as a man chasing the ghost of his sin. He took only Ghost with him, along with Ser Davos and a few silent guards. Tyrion had begged him not to go. "Let it go, Jon," he said. "Let her go." But Jon said nothing, only gave him a tired look and rode to the docks. Dragonstone greeted him with storms and silence, but he wasn't alone. The castle had been claimed, not by soldiers but by zealots, followers of Daenerys who called themselves the Children of Flame. They dressed in scorched red, wore chains around their necks, and spoke her name like a prayer. They believed Daenerys had not died, but transcended, that Drogon had carried her soul to the fire, and she would return as a goddess. When Jon stepped into the great hall, their leader stood waiting. She was young, maybe no older than Arya had been, barefoot, pale, with eyes the color of ash. Her name was Selena, and she called herself the Flameborn. "You wear her guilt like a crown," she said to Jon, "and yet you walk into her sacred place?" "This castle belongs to no one now," Jon replied quietly. "No, it belongs to her," Selena said, and dozens of robed zealots emerged from the shadows. "You have no right to be here, not after what you did." Jon didn't reach for his sword. He looked around at the mad faces, at their trembling hands, and whispered chants. These weren't warriors. They were broken hearts, bound by delusion. "I came to see the dragon," he said. "You came to die," she whispered, but Drogon did not come to them. He roamed the cliffs, always just out of reach, refusing their worship, ignoring their offerings. It seemed even he had no more faith to give. Jon stayed 3 nights. The zealots kept their distance, but watched him with open hatred. Davos warned him not to sleep. Ghosts snarled every time Selena passed near. Still, Jon refused to leave. On the 4th night, the attack came. Jon was meditating by the beach cliffs when fire erupted from the woods, not from Drogon, but from torches. The zealots came screaming, wild with fury and prophecy. "The Kinslayer must burn," they cried. "Blood." For the Flame Mother Jon fought, but not to kill. His blade rang against theirs in the stormy dark, until Selena herself charged him with a flaming sword, stolen from some dead knight. "You took our light," she shrieked, "and now you'll give yours." Jon disarmed her, pressing her to the ground. "I didn't want the crown," he said through gritted teeth. "I never wanted her to die." "But she did," she spat. "And your hands were the last she felt. Last she felt." She lunged again. Jon struck her with the hilt, knocking her unconscious. The others fled. Ghost chased them off into the forest, and Davos limped over, his arm bleeding. "That's what she left behind, lad," Davos muttered. "Madness, fire, and madness." Jon looked toward the sky. Drogon circled once more, his eyes watching, and Jon finally understood something. Daenerys hadn't just left behind a broken city or a dead army. She'd left behind a faith, a legacy, one that people were willing to kill for, and Jon was the devil in their story. When Jon returned to King's Landing, the world already knew. Rumors of the zealots spread faster than ravens. The people spoke of a cult rising in the east, burning villages that refused to kneel to the Flameborn queen. Daenerys' death had made her a martyr, and Jon the enemy of the flame. Tyrion greeted him with a heavy sigh. "So now we fight ghosts and gods," he said, pouring himself wine that did little to steady his trembling hands. "The dead queen has more armies now than the living king." Jon said nothing. He dropped his bloodied cloak on the floor, sat in silence, and stared at the melted iron throne, its jagged form reflected in his hollow eyes. The court was thinner than ever. Many lords had refused to come. Some had gone rogue, claiming their own crowns in corners of Westeros. Aegon's legacy was fading, and the realm stood splintered, too weary for another war, too angry for peace. But then came a knock that shook the Red Keep to its bones, an envoy from Essos, a black ship with red sails, and on it Missandei's brother, who had joined the Red Priests of R'hllor after her death. He bore a simple message: "The Queen lives." They called her R'hllor the Fireborn, a girl born in the fire the day Daenerys died, same silver hair, same violet eyes. Raised by the Red Temple of Volantis, fed prophecy and rage, groomed to be the reincarnation of Daenerys Stormborn. She was only 8, but already her name sparked rebellions. The Red Priests were spreading across the free cities, claiming R'hllor as the chosen flame. And worse, the Dothraki were rallying behind her. They said Drogon had returned to Essos to guard her cradle. Tyrion stood at the council table, white-faced, reading the Raven again. "She's a child," he muttered. "A child they'll use like a torch, and we'll burn with her." Jon clenched his jaw. "She's not Dany." No, but she has Dany's face, and if Drogon is truly with her, the people might not care. Jon looked to Davos. How many men can we still call? Davos sighed. The North won't help you, not after what happened. Sansa won't send a single blade. The Vale's quiet. The Reach has broken into 3. The Riverlands follow no one. And the Stormlands? Jon asked. Gendry tries, Tyrion said, but even his own bannermen whisper that he's the bastard of a whore's bastard. They don't fear him. They don't follow him. Jon stood up slowly. Then they'll follow fire. Davos looked at him. You thinking of going to Essos? No, Jon said. I'm thinking of bringing the truth here. He called for the maesters. He called for scribes, and for the first time in months he addressed the realm directly, through letters, through ravens, through blood. He confessed. In every letter he admitted the truth. He killed Daenerys. Out of love, out of fear, out of duty. He didn't claim righteousness. He didn't ask forgiveness, but he warned of what was coming. A child raised in fire will only bring more, he wrote. Do not follow the shadow of a queen who never wanted gods or temples. She dreamed of breaking chains, not wearing them. The letters reached Winterfell. Sansa didn't reply. They reached the Reach, and one lord burned them on sight. But in the streets of King's Landing, something changed. For the first time, the people looked up at the Red Keep and whispered not curses, but questions. Could it be true? Could the man who brought ruin be the only one willing to stop it? But war didn't wait. Ships from Volantis landed near Storm's End, and flying above them, Drogon, not wild, not feral, but obedient to the child they called Queen. Storms, and fell within hours. Drogon's flame turned its walls to molten stone, and the soldiers inside barely had time to scream. Gendry Baratheon was dragged from the rubble, beaten and bloodied, but spared for now. They paraded him before the girl they called Rhaella the Fireborn, her silver hair braided in dragonbone rings, her small hands resting on the hilt of a Valyrian steel dagger gifted by the Red Priests. She looked at Gendry with the cold detachment of a child raised to believe the world owed her everything. "You're the son of a usurper," she said, her voice high, soft, and disturbingly calm. "But I will spare you, because my mother would have." Gendry spat blood at her feet. That was the last act of defiance before he was shipped to Volantis in chains, meant to serve as proof that the new queen could be merciful when she chose. Jon received the news in silence. Storm's End gone, Drogon confirmed. Rhaella leading armies of Dothraki, freedmen and fire priests. And worse, she was being crowned in 2 moons at Dragonstone. She was coming for King's Landing. "She's a child," Tyrion said again, pacing, "but she has the face of prophecy. The people will rally to her, Jon, even the ones who cursed. Daenerys, they don't want truth. They want a symbol." Jon stood at the battlements of the Red Keep, watching the city from above. He could already feel the shift in the air, hope awakening in the wrong name. "If they want fire again," Jon said softly, "they'll get it. But not from her." He gave the order. The walls would burn first. It shocked even Davos. "You're going to torch the city's own gates? I'll torch anything that lets a dragon in." And so the people watched in confusion and fear as the gates of King's Landing were drenched in oil, the outer towers packed with explosives and ballistae installed along every rooftop. The dragon killers once used by Cersei were reforged, upgraded, multiplied. Jon knew they might not be enough. But he also knew what Drogon feared most, his rider. So Jon made a decision no one expected. He would ride north, not to escape, but to find the last thing Daenerys left behind. A forgotten name, a buried bloodline, the last living Targaryen, hidden by fire and frost. Samwell Tarly had sent a raven weeks earlier, with a whisper Jon hadn't yet dared believe. There was another. A babe born in the shadow of Daenerys's conquest, hidden in a village wiped out during the march on King's Landing, the mother dead, the midwife gone. But the child, it seemed, had survived. And Jon, tired of being a ghost, decided to chase life. He left Tyrion in charge, much to the dwarf's dismay. "If you die in the snow again," Tyrion muttered, "don't expect me to write a song about it." Jon only nodded. "If I die, don't let them crown her. You assume I'll still have a tongue when they come?" Jon turned without a smile. Ghost followed, silent as a shadow, and as he rode out of the city, a dark whisper began to rise. Among the people, "He's fleeing. The bastard king runs from the dragon. The throne belongs to her," but they didn't know what he was really chasing. Not power, not redemption, but blood, because if he could find the child, he could prove that Rhaella wasn't the last, and maybe, just maybe, he could pass the crown to someone who hadn't killed to earn it, someone unburnt by hate, someone innocent. But innocence didn't last long in Westeros, especially not with fire in your veins. The North welcomed him with silence and suspicion. Winterfell's gates opened, not with honor, but reluctance. Sansa stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, wrapped in her furs like armor. Her red hair danced in the icy wind, but her eyes were steel. "You shouldn't have come back," she said. "I didn't come for you," Jon replied. "I came for the child." She blinked. "So it's true." He stepped closer. "You knew?" "I received Sam's raven." She looked past him, into the grey horizon. "I didn't believe it. It's not until I saw the way the crows watched the old forest. Not until I heard the wildlings speak her name." "Where is she?" Sansa hesitated. "North of the wall." Jon's breath caught. "She's alive." "For now," she said. "The free folk protect her. They believe she's the real daughter of ice and fire, that her coming was foretold, but not everyone agrees on who she belongs to." Jon frowned. "What do you mean?" "She's a Targaryen by blood, but she was raised by a dying woman from Bear Island. Her first words weren't Dracarys. They were knife and snow." Jon nodded slowly. "I need to see her." Sansa didn't stop him, but she didn't wish him well either. "You left this kingdom broken," she said, "and now you return chasing a child like she's your savior." "She might be," Jon whispered. "Or she might be my curse." Ghost led the way north, bounding ahead through the snow. Jon passed Last Hearth, now just a ruin, its charred walls still echoing the cries of the long night. The trees whispered to him. The cold didn't bite, it embraced him. And finally, after 3 days beyond the wall, he found them, a small camp of wildlings huddled in the shadow of a frozen cliff. Torches burned low, eyes glared from fur hoods, but one man stepped forward and smiled with recognition, Tormund Giantsbane. "Well, well," he grunted, pulling Jon into a rough embrace. "The dead man walks again." "I need to see her. She doesn't talk much," Tormund said, "and she don't like strangers." "I'm no stranger," Jon replied. They led him to a cave, deep and warm with hidden fire. And there she was, no older than 6, pale as snow, with hair as white as ash, and eyes that burned with strange calm. She didn't flinch when she saw him, didn't cry, didn't run. She just stared. Jon knelt slowly. "Do you know who I am?" She didn't answer. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a small pendant, a dragon carved from wood, one he had kept from Daenerys's camp. He laid it before her. "This belonged to your aunt." Still silence, then she whispered, soft as the snow outside, "The fire talks to me." Jon stiffened. "What does it say?" She looked up, her eyes glowing. "That you burn inside and that you're too late." The wind howled. Tormund stepped back, uneasy. "What do you mean?" Jon asked. The girl stood slowly. She walked too. The wall of the cave placed her hand against the stone, and the rock cracked open, revealing charred bones sealed beneath. "Flame priests came," she whispered. "They tried to take me." Jon's eyes widened. "You killed them." "No," she said, "he did." And then Jon heard it, the sound of wings. Far above the cave something roared, but it wasn't Drogon. It was another dragon, smaller, wounded, but alive. Jon rushed outside and saw it, a young black dragon circling the cliff, bleeding from one wing, its eyes wild with fear and fury. "She bonded with it," Tormund said grimly. "Called it from the fire. Named it herself." Jon turned to the girl. "What's his name?" She looked at him and whispered, "Ashwing." The snow began to fall harder, and Jon Snow realized something far worse than prophecy or rebellion. There wasn't just one child of fire rising. There were two. By the time Jon returned to King's Landing, he was no longer the man who had left it. He brought with him the child, silent, fierce, and strange, and the wounded dragon she had named Ashwing, hidden in a makeshift cage covered by cloth and shadow. The people of the north had not stopped him. They had watched him go with wary eyes, some even bowing, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of hope. But the south was already burning. Rhaella the Fireborn had taken Dragonstone and was now advancing through Blackwater Bay. Ships bearing the red. Flame sigils sailed under skies choked with smoke. Volantine fire priests had taken the stepstones, and Drogon flew, not as a beast of rage anymore, but as a weapon with purpose. Jon stood in the broken throne room once again, the girl by his side. She did not speak. She watched everything with haunting calm, as if she had seen it all before. Ghost never left her. Tyrion stood by the window, his eyes sunken, his cup long empty. "They say the girl rides a new dragon," he said, not looking at Jon. "Is it true?" Jon nodded. "His name is Ashwing, and she doesn't speak much, but the dragon listens to her, the fire listens to her." Tyrion turned. "Are we looking at the future or another curse?" Jon didn't answer. Because deep down, he didn't know, the lords had begun to rally, not to Jon, but to fear. The old names were returning. Tarly, Royce, even a few Lannisters crawling out of the dirt. But they didn't trust Jon. They only feared the girl, and they hated what was coming. Word came from the coast. Rhaella had reached King's Landing. Drogon soared above the city once. Again, but this time he did not attack. He circled, watched, waited. Jon climbed the walls of the Red Keep that night and looked into the firelit sky. The girl, Nyra, as she finally revealed, stood beside him, her small hand clutching Ashwing's tooth that she wore around her neck. "Are you scared of her?" Jon asked quietly. Nyra didn't blink. "No. She'll kill us both. She might try." Jon stared at her. "What are you?" She looked at him, and for the first time there was no chill in her eyes, only sorrow. "I'm what the fire left behind." And then the horns blew. Rhaella's army had reached the gates. The next morning a rider came forward under a banner of parley. A priest with eyes burning red delivered the terms. "Bow to Queen Rhaella, lay down your crown, and the dragon will not burn this city." Jon stepped forward. "There is no crown," he said. "Only ash." The priest smiled. "Then you've already lost." Before the rider returned, Nyra stepped forward. "Tell your queen," she said, voice sharp and sudden, "that I am the flame she forgot, and that I do not burn." The priest sneered. "You are nothing." And then he turned to see Ashwing. Perched on the walls, eyes glowing, wings spread. The people screamed, but Jon didn't move. He placed a hand on Nyra's shoulder and said, "If we fall, let it be for something true," because he knew what was coming. Fire against fire. Blood against blood. Rhaella would attack within days, and for the first time in his cursed reign, Jon Snow would not run. He would stand, fight, burn if he must. But he would not give the realm to a shadow of prophecy. He had taken the throne in blood. Now he would defend it in fire. The sky over King's Landing turned orange before the first arrow flew. From the decks of black volantine ships, fire priests chanted in unison, their hands raised as if summoning judgment itself. Rhaella stood on the bow of the lead ship, clad in crimson armor too large for her body, her silver hair braided in a crown. Beside her, Drogon circled, wings vast and heavy with fire. Inside the Red Keep, the air trembled with fear. The people did not scream. They were too tired, too broken. Some had begun praying. Others packed what little they had and ran for the hills, most simply stared at the skies, waiting for the end they had already witnessed once. Jon stood at the gates in his black armor, Ghost at his side, Nyra to his left. She had painted her face in ash, the way the free folk once did before battle. Ashwing stood atop the highest tower, still weakened, but ready. Tyrion limped to Jon, his voice low. "There's still time to run." Jon shook his head. "She wants my crown. Let her take it from my corpse." Tyrion looked to Nyra. "And what of her?" Jon's voice cracked. "She was never meant for this." Nyra turned to him softly. "Neither were you." The horns blew. From the east, Rhaella's ground. Forces charged the city walls, led by Dothraki screamers and flame warriors clad in burning armor. From the sky, Drogon swooped, releasing a torrent of flame down the outer battlements. But the walls of King's Landing had been reforged with something else. Dragon-hardened steel and wildfire traps. The first wave of attackers were consumed. By green fire, screams tore through the battlefield. Drogon recoiled, thrown off course by an explosion beneath him. And then the order came. Jon's archers fired. Ballistae shot up like spears toward the heavens, one striking Drogon's wing, causing him to spiral for a moment. But the beast recovered, roared, and dove again. Nyra climbed atop Ashwing despite Jon's protests. "He'll kill you," he shouted. "He'll kill us," she said. "Unless I end this." Jon watched, helpless, as she rose into the sky, her small frame clutching the spines of a dragon born of cold fire. Ashwing screamed, challenging his older brother. Dragon met dragon. Above the city, two great beasts clashed, claws tearing, teeth snapping. Fire lit the sky like a second sun. Below, Jon led the defense, cutting through zealots and red priests. Alike, his sword an extension of his grief, Ghost ripped through men like a ghost of death. Tyrion, wounded, helped women and children flee through tunnels below the keep. Then Jon saw her, Rhaella. She had entered the city, standing atop the corpse of a ballista crew, untouched, flanked by red priests. She saw Jon and smiled. "You stole her crown," she said, "but it was always meant for me." Jon lowered his sword. She didn't want gods. She didn't want temples. She just wanted peace. Rhaella lifted her hand, glowing with flame. "And I will bring it. Through fire, through faith." Jon charged before she could speak again. Steel met flame. Her priests attacked, but Jon cut them down. Rhaella moved like a dancer, her blade dipped in fire. She was a child, but she fought with something far older, like she was possessed. He knocked the sword from her hands. She stared at him. "I'm not her," she whispered, "but I am what she left behind." Jon raised Longclaw and hesitated. Then the sky screamed. Above, Drogon bit into Ashwing's neck, and Nyra fell. She tumbled through the air like a falling star, crashing into the ruins below. Jon screamed her name, but she didn't rise. Ashwing plummeted into the sea, and Drogon, though bleeding, landed beside Rhaella. Jon turned to the Girl Queen one last time. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Then a single arrow, loosed by one of Jon's own men, pierced Rhaella's throat from behind. She choked, stumbled, fell. Drogon roared in agony and flew. This time he did not return. Days passed. The fires burned out. The red priests vanished or were killed. The Volantine ships fled. The people stood in a broken city again. But they were alive. And Jon Snow, he abdicated. He carried Nyra's still-breathing body. through the shattered gates, climbed the steps of the throne room one last time, and sat on the throne of ash and blood. For a moment, then he rose, and left it behind forever. He rode north, beyond the wall, where fire could not reach, where kings did not matter, only ghosts.